Welcome back to another episode of BopCast. And today I have something different for you. I have a podcast interview. I've been on over 40 different podcasts, and I do not choose to highlight many of them here on BopCast. They're all great, but I do like to choose the best possible content for you. And today I have an episode that fits that mold specifically. This is with my friend Justin Nolan, also known as Just Tries. He runs the Just Keep Learning podcast, and he works with incarcerated youth to help them grow and thrive in their life. So I'm extremely grateful to have this opportunity to be on this podcast today, and I would love to share it with you. There's a lot of learnings, a lot of takeaways, and really to give you the summary, we go through my background, which you may have heard of some before, but I also touch on some details that I've never shared on a podcast before. We talk about podcasting, business. If you are looking to do anything in your life specific, whether that's a side hustle, a business, a podcast, whatever that might be, this is definitely going to be valuable for you. So I want to thank Justin for having me today. I appreciate you watching and listening, and as you know, this is a 100% listener supported show. We don't have ads or sponsors right now, so I really appreciate it if you could just share this with somebody who may find it valuable today. So thank you so much for tuning in, listening, and watching. All the links and timestamps are in the description below, and let's get to the episode with my friend Justin.
If I brought you into the jail that I work in with youth, where they love creating hip hop and they're very entrepreneurial, but I asked you to introduce yourself, who are you and what do you do?
Justin, thank you so much, man, for having me again. I'm excited to do this. I know our first conversation was great, so we'll make it a great conversation again today. A little bit of time has gone by as well. We probably both evolved. But yeah, so I haven't kind of decided on anything specific on how I introduce myself, but if you want, I'll go with the titles first so we can contextualize myself a little bit easier. So I'm a founder of a company. I'm a rapper. I'm a DJ. I've had a girlfriend for 3.5 years, which I think is really important as well, which is not something I had done before. So I'm a boyfriend now, dedicated. And yeah, man, I help people launch their podcasts and make podcasts. That's really what I do in a simple way in terms of what I do for business. That's in the form of consulting, and we have a production company as well. And then, yeah, I'm a rapper. I've been doing that for 6 or 7 years. About to release a new song Thursday night. This is now Wednesday. So probably when this out, it'll definitely be out. So maybe people can go check that out. Really trying to, I'm rethinking how I'm thinking about my music career and really all the things that I balance in my life. But, to sum it up, man, like I'm multi-passionate. I love doing what I love to do. I love bodybuilding. I love skimboarding. I love the outdoors. I live in a rural area. Like I really just, like to keep a balance of all the things that I'm interested in. And I must have some crazy ADHD or something because I always got to do something different all the time. So, but that's really a gist of myself personally. And yeah, there's other ways that I could go about describing myself, but I figured give them the well-rounded approach and then we can kind of move from there.
100%. And whatever it is that leads to the multi-passionate thing is very common when it comes to this show for sure. I've noticed that as a through line. I would say probably through every episode, and maybe it's because the type of guests that I'm having on are people who are motivated and interested in putting themselves out there, and that overlaps with the idea of being multi-passionate. I'm not too sure what it is, but definitely it's a common theme. In your case, what have you learned about being multi-passionate and being able to find, as you put it, balance or sort of balance?
I feel like I haven't been able to find it, but I'm kind of coming to the realization that I'm not sure if it's achievable, but I think it's a good thing if it's not, because the constant pursuit of trying to figure out where all the pieces fit is actually the pursuit itself. Like that is the enjoyment, I think, partially. And a lot of times we can get caught up in like outcomes of, oh no, my single didn't hit this, or my business quota this month didn't hit this, or all these, I didn't get booked on this many podcasts, or whatever the metric is. And then, that can really blind us from the actual fun of trying to, do a lot of the things that you enjoy doing. So I'm really trying to emphasize, like for myself, the journey. And like, I'll say, for instance, right, like, I was obsessed with fitness when I was younger, from like 16 to like 19 probably. I was really obsessed in high school and like trying to get bigger, and I was always the small kid, and I was always like, not like picked last, but I wasn't like the most athletic kid. in terms of like size wise. Like I could always run faster than people, but I was never bigger than anybody. So that kind of got to me. So I was obsessed with that. Now I'm 24 and I'm becoming more interested in it. And I'm trying to figure out, I'm like, why am I so obsessed with this again? But I don't care why. I'm just leaning into it all day long. I listen to bodybuilding podcasts, powerlifting, all this stuff, like, changing my workouts, going back and, dialing in my diet again and stuff like that. It's not something I lost, but I'm just a lot more interested in it now. This past summer, I mentioned these two things of skimboarding as well. Like, I'm like, all right, cool. I'm literally researching boards, buying a new board, like planning on potentially going out to California to go skim out there. Like, I'm just not questioning any of these things. I'm just leaning into them. And it can be easy to get caught up in, like I said, the outcomes. But also my business is moving in a direction where it's growing. And I don't need to be like worried about it the same way I used to be. So that's kind of freeing up, I feel like, my mental space. But really, back to your question, I don't have a system or a way to balance the passions. I just try to lean into them if I feel like I'm really interested in them again. I don't really question it and go, nah, I should be doing this instead. I'm 24. I'm like, let me lean into being 24 and just kind of, take them wherever they end up taking me.
I love the saying, care, but don't worry. And I know you said that you don't worry about them. And I love this idea of like, there's a big difference between worrying about something and caring about it. I was going to ask about the business, but you said you don't have to worry about it as much. And so in terms of like just pragmatically scheduling those sorts of things out, though, as opposed to the philosophical, what you decide to do, like, do you use a calendar? Yeah. Do you do, like, when you get into the nitty gritty of that, what do you do to kind of keep the mind straight while you go into all these different things?
Yeah, great question, man. I do keep a calendar. I didn't put this on my calendar, and that's why I was 4 minutes late. So that's just a testament to, me just kind of figuring out that process for myself. But I'll tell you what I have figured out. I need physical notes. I don't need to refer to them all the time. I could get better at referring to them. But I definitely need to have physical notes. Like, there's just something about the kind of digital notes that does something different for me. I also need the digital notes. So my Apple Notes they're organized by folder. There's business. Within the business, there's 5 folders. I have an ideas folder that's only ideas. Then I have I have all of these different folders on Apple Notes. So that's for me personally, the physical notes, the Apple Notes. I'm not a Post-its guy. That's too unorganized for me. And yeah, the calendar, I really try to live by it. Like, I'm not this type of person that on Sunday I plan out every hour of my week. Like, that's probably beneficial. I want to say that I wish I was, but I'm just not that person. I'm a little more go with the flow. I'm in sales. People book calls. They cancel calls. My schedule's a little up in the air at times. So I'm not like overly rigid about it. But I do, when I need to do something, I have to put it down in the calendar, Google Calendar immediately. And then when I'm talking to somebody on a call or whatever, I use my handwritten notes to kind of just jot while the conversation's going on. So that keeps me staying on track. I never write down more than 3 to 5 things in a day that I have to do because I know I'm just not going to do them. And I also try not to overly rely on checking boxes, which I think is really easy. I'm the type of person, I'm not this like I said, I'm not a schedule my whole week on Sunday guy. I'm not a morning routine needs to be the same every day. I don't do that. But I do have one. Right. And really, like, the answer to this question is like, I've found the things that work for me. I've done cold showers for 30 days. I've done workout at 7 a.m. every day. Like, I've done all these different habits, intermittent fasting for 1.5 years. Like, I've done a lot of experiments on myself. I have a morning routine that I can do it and I feel great. If I don't do it, I don't feel bad. Right. So that's the morning routine that I want to have. So it's really about like figuring kind of how to optimize all these things together. But like tools wise, like I said, physical notes on the computer, on the Apple, for the business, because life and business is the same. They bleed into each other. Google Docs. And then we organize all the Google stuff in Notion. So I've been using Notion, which has been great for document organization, company organization, tasks for what we have to do and what the team has to do. So that's really how I do it in terms of how to organize it. It's not, like I said, I try not to overly, process anything, systematize anything, organize everything. But I just kind of have these little ways of doing it, whether it's online or offline, to try to keep me on track.
I love what you say there about not really having shame and guilt around not being able to achieve doing that morning routine or any part of keeping the balanced schedule, because I just tweeted this the other day that trying to control things in our external world, if we fail and we get super pissed off at ourselves in our internal world, isn't even worth it. Whether it's a better sleep routine, better exercise, better nutrition, or keeping, that sort of like $1 million morning routine, and you fail and then you get so angry at yourself. It's like you just ruined probably doing it the last 5 days in a row. And it's really an interesting thing, because as someone who's really hard on myself traditionally, and I'm getting better at it, like self-talk or whatever, it's been really valuable for me to learn. And now I want other people to be able to appreciate that too, because it took me some time. Like, I'm assuming, but maybe not, were you hard on yourself before, and kind of like what led to this shift?
Yeah, definitely. I was definitely hard on myself before, but I think that before I talk about myself, I think there's a culture that is like a morning routine culture or a habits culture that has pros and cons. But to say that these are the habits that, like, the successful people have, is Warren Buffett's drinking Coca-Colas. Like, that ain't, he's eating McDonald's. Like, is that a good habit? Like, it's not. If somebody tells you this is the thing, it's definitely not the thing. You know what I'm saying? So, like, that's how I look at this now. I think my mind has just shifted in terms of, like, first of all, like, I don't believe anything really that I see. So, like, what I'm saying is, if somebody has some kind of LinkedIn post about, hey, here's this habit or XYZ, like, I do this every day, or this is what worked for me. Like, I'll take your anecdotal story, but that's really it. Like, I'm just going to take everything with a grain of salt. Or just because somebody's successful doesn't mean that, you have to do what they do. Like, most likely you don't. Like, most likely it's not going to work for you. And I think, like, most people will disregard their kind of intuition and just go towards, like, somebody that they trust and kind of just, like, take their advice. My mindset on advice has shifted drastically, because I now I just take everything with so much more of a grain of salt, no matter who you are. And I just believe that, like, most things don't work for everybody. So that's definitely how my mind has shifted. Yeah, I, like, definitely was harder on myself, and I was happy then too. Different things make me happy now. I don't think that I'm even less hard on myself. I think I'm just letting myself lean into other things that before I might have said, well, it's not on your strict routine, so don't do it. I remember, like, planning out in college, like, planning out every hour of my day to a T, dialed every 30 minutes, all that stuff. Like, I was happy. I didn't have a problem with that. Like, it didn't overwhelm me. Now maybe I'll get back to it and I'll love it. But, like, I just think, like, anything that's end all be all, I'm not really going with at this point. Like, I will read a book and, I'll just try to get everything out of that book, instead of before I'd be like, well, I'm going to read 1 book a month or 2 books a month, or I'm going to go for quantity. Now it's really about quality. If I start listening to a podcast, I'm not getting stuff I can use, then I'm going to just turn it off. Right. So it's really about, like, a few things, how I take advice, the time. So how I manage my time now, which ties into all this. And then really just, like, knowing that it's going to be my experience that's going to give me the answers ultimately, rather than somebody online or some book that I read.
One thing I've started doing recently is not reading books front to back anymore. I mean, in terms of the nonfiction space, where it's not about a story per se, but something you can gain from it, like The Power of Now or Magic of Thinking Big. It's like, flip through it and see, like, a chapter, or even just a heading, a topic that it's like, oh yeah, that's really going to be good today to give that little dopamine hit that'll help me on this journey. But I don't need to read the book front to back and feel disappointed about not doing that.
It's not a requirement. That's the thing. It's not a requirement. When I read my first 5 books on self-development, I read them front to back, because every idea was new. Every idea was like, how does nobody know this? Now it's like, I've kind of heard it. Alex Hormozy said this. I was listening to his podcast today, and he was like, typically older books are better because these people weren't trying to make a buck off their book. Right. Mm-hmm. So a lot of them were just to feed the next generation. Like, that's the type of stuff that I'm trying to find and also sift through in the modern age. to find, because a lot of it is like you said, man, like you don't read the whole book because it's probably not all applicable, you know? So yeah. And that comes down to a time thing too. I do the same thing. I don't have a problem spending an Audible credit and not reading it. It's just, I remember I got charged. I was in Dallas and I scheduled an Uber from the Airbnb to the airport. Right. And, the Uber never came, and the guy he accepted the ride and left it on because they know that you're going to go to the airport. So then you have to cancel it when you lose internet connection, and then they'll get the money for not doing the ride. I never called Uber. Like, I don't like my time of me envisioning being on the phone with Uber is like, I'd rather spend the $30 and not get that back. Right. So that was the first time in my life, dude. Like, you know, my parents weren't like cheap, but obviously we weren't like balling out or anything like that. Like, it was all like things that you need, you buy. So, you know, I'm really trying to flip my own script, I think, a little bit. And obviously, you know, grandparents, depression era, right? Like, they pass that stuff down. Like, I'm teaching my girlfriend's like, I want Tide Pods. I'm like, we're not doing those. We have to use a little bit of detergent. I'm like, what am I kidding? Right. But it really is crazy, man. Anyway, probably went off there a little bit, but.
No, I got you. I just last night, and I'll have to play this back for my wife when I upload this. And I don't know if she'll be happy or pissed, but either way, I think she'll appreciate it because it's nice to hear from somebody else. And I did not tell you to say that, but we were just talking last night. Our dealership with our cars screwed up, and we basically have the option to go in there and get our, you know, $45 back. And she's like, so do you want to do that on Thursday night? And I just went silent, and my brain and heart are telling me like, nope, that's the last thing I want to do.
No. And that is also a testament to the fact that most people really won't do anything. Like, you could give them the world. Like, I always say that with content, right? Like, give everybody all your secrets. They're not even going to do it. They're probably still going to hire you. And then if they do take your secrets, and then your secrets, quote unquote, because come on, secrets, you know, if they do take your advice and it works, then you're going to have infinite goodwill for life. Right. So it's like, but I do believe that, like, most of us are not really motivated to do, you know, much. It takes a lot to get motivated to do something that isn't in your average day-to-day kind of activities, you know?
Well, and for me, it's the weighing the $45 and the traditional mindset that was similarly passed down. I can speak to that exact thing that you were talking about, learning from my family, and we all learn from our parents and so on and so forth. Like, that same idea of like getting better at being like, is $45 and the time and stress it takes to speak to these people as I go in there worth being able to edit a podcast episode, for example, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's true. And you're not going to get that time back that you go to the dealership and have to do that exchange. So
yeah, I'd rather just sit and stare at my kids coloring or something.
Yeah, I'd rather go make another sale or like spend the energy on that, you know?
Yeah, 100%. So there are so many amazing topics that I know we can dive into. Before we get too far away from like the chronological a bit, as you were sharing in the introduction, these different headings of things you do, whether it's podcasting or music or being a business owner or boyfriend, let's go a little bit back in terms of the journey. Like, chronologically, if you took us through, you know, you're a young kid in school and you're going into all these things, how do we get to where we are here in November 2022?
Yeah, it's a good question. And now the other interview we did is coming back to me, because I'm like, where did somebody ask me about like more of my childhood? Because people don't ask me that as much, but I enjoy talking about it, to be honest with you, because I don't talk about it too much. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in a rural area. There was a couple kids like around my house, but it's very spread out. So, you know, there might be 30 people or maybe 50 people per square mile or something like that. Like, maybe where I live, like, I might be completely off, but basically there's no apartment buildings. It's not like I walk down the street and I don't see a person, you know, I might see some cars, but I don't see a person. So that's kind of the vibe where I grew up, and there's way less people even when I was growing up. So, you know, I grew up as a rural kid, man. I had like a little gator that I rode around, and I just did stuff in the woods and outside. And my dad is a blue collar guy. You know, he was always doing projects, teaching me. You know, I was always on jobs with him, doing side jobs and kind of learning like, you know, how these things work, and work ethic I definitely got from him and my grandfather. But, you know, it was at the point in middle school where I had a friend who made YouTube videos. He had think he got, 500,000 views or something. We were probably 12 years old, 13 years old. And that was a light bulb for me. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try this. And I tried it, and I made videos for a year or two, and I finally got a video to get a couple 100,000 views. And I was like 13, and I just thought that was the coolest thing in the world. And then I quit. Then I stopped making videos. So at that point, my life was progressing. I was going into high school. I didn't want to be a nerd. I didn't want to be considered a YouTube kid or whatever. It wasn't cool like it is now. Like content's like creation is cool now. Everybody does it. It wasn't cool back then, man, 10 years ago.
So you didn't want to be Mr. Beast?
If Mr. Beast, if I would have had that influence, man, maybe I would have. But no, not. But
he was a nerd. You guys must be around the same age too.
Yeah, I think he's like my age, maybe 24. Yeah, he's way further ahead than me, dude. I got to do something different, bro. What's happening with my YouTube? I got to start spending $1 million a video, But that guy's story is great. So grassroots, man. Like, if I would have stuck with gaming, I probably would have totally, had a huge following or whatever. But I lost interest in that anyway, so it made sense that I didn't want to keep doing it. And fast forward a little bit, man. I was hanging out with my friend. Like I said, super interested in fitness and lifting. We would bang pre-workout to the dome. And then we would just work out for like 3 hours every day. And after that, we were still hyped up. So we would freestyle and rap, and he would put on rap beats. I'm like, what's this beat? What's that? I'm like, rap? I don't know. We're listening to rap. I knew Eminem, Logic. That was it. So he introduced me to hip hop, man. And it kind of went from there. We released a diss track. My whole school listened to it. I had a verse, he had a verse, and our friend produced it, who was way more talented at production than we were at rap, but it still worked. But it was really that journey for me of going from when I was 13, kind of having a little bit blip of that, like 5 seconds of fame or whatever, and then just kind of quitting it completely, and then finding this music later on, which like ended up, I was wondering why I played guitar for so long, but I never really did anything with it. And I think it led me to, be finally like getting into music, releasing it, and then being like, oh my God, like I can just make music, people listen to it. That's crazy to me, So that was really the journey of from when I was a kid to like how I progressed in terms of making content. And I'll leave this story with this, which is when I was a kid, before I made gaming videos, I made card trick videos in my living room, and I would teach you how to do a card trick. My second podcasting client ever was a mentalist and a professional card thrower who was on Jackass. And he's been on stages globally. He's been on the Ellen Show. So it's crazy. Like a lot of these things, like from playing guitar to rapping, from doing card tricks to working for the magician, like a lot of things came full circle later on.
Yeah. And in terms of going from the creative, which I know we're going to dive back into because I'm excited to talk about those different things, into the business, where did the business and podcasting part enter the picture? Was that after hip hop? How old were you, or how recent was that part that podcasts started becoming a part of it?
Yeah, so I left off at the music, so I'll take it from there. So like I'm making music, right? I'm probably like 17, something like that. And I graduate high school and I go into community college, and all my friends left to go to regular college except for like 2 of us. And the ones that were still there, I was friends with, but we weren't like super duper tight. And time went by. I just felt honestly just felt lost and didn't know what to do. I loved podcasting. I love podcasts. I love Joe Rogan, Tim Ferriss. Don't remember who else I was listening to at that point. It's mostly probably just Joe. But I love the medium, man. And I figured I'm dumb enough to start one, so I'll just start one. And I remember, I ran the idea by a few kids a while before that, and they were like, yeah, totally, we'd listen to it. And that was enough for me. So I started it, did 2 episodes by myself. In my community college class, I'm in community college. I'm learning self-development. I'm learning meditation. I'm really trying to help myself, right? And I meet this guy named Dan Valente, and he made 6 figures on the stock market at like 22, 21. I was like 19. He was a few years older than me, but he had a nice car. He had really nice clothes, and apparently he made a lot of money. So I said, you're coming on my podcast, my man. And so he was my first guest back in 2018. It was a little over, I guess, 4 years ago now. And that was my start in podcasting. That led me to, I was a mechanic during this time. That was my job, from high school to into college. Honestly, I would come home and make podcasts and music. And I just didn't feel like working on cars anymore as much as I enjoyed it. I just liked this other stuff better. and had another kid on my podcast who made six figures doing social media management at 23 years old. And I said, okay, I'll just copy what you did. So he sent me scripts. He was like, this is what you do. I said, I'm making six figs, baby. And didn't. I made $80 in 3 months.
That's interesting for sure.
Yeah.
And so curious, aside a bit, Art of Manliness, was that a show that you listened to at all? Because a lot of people lump that in with the Tim Ferriss and the Joe Rogan and those kind of earlies. And then that was for sure one of the ones, those two as well. But Art of Manliness was one of those first ones that I listened to a lot that kind of led to me being like, oh, you know, I could make a show someday too. Which is like that natural progression. What was that first show for you though? What was it about? Was it about that idea of making money?
So the first, my idea was, it was called the Millennial Mind Podcast. Okay. Now I had no idea that I'm like the youngest. I can't even, it sucks because I'm in between millennial, whatever, is it younger than that, of X, Y, Z? I don't know which one it is, but I'm not really a millennial. Most of them are much older than me, so it doesn't make sense. Like I'm at like the youngest end of it. But anyway, I still made the Millennial Mind because I consider myself that. And, you know, I was like, okay, I'll make a podcast for like people my age who are literally just trying to figure it out, you know? Yeah, that was my only mindset. But the actual reason this show started is because I was doing these 1 minute Instagram videos called Monday Thoughts. And they were 1 minute long, right when Instagram introduced video, no reels yet. And I would do a 1 minute video just talking to the camera, walking around my yard or something, talking about some concept that I was reading in a book. I used a concept from the book Sapiens by Yuval Harari that details the history of humankind. And I just did one video on it. And I'm like, this is just not enough time to explain this concept. And people were interested in the concept. So what I did was I just basically got my webcam up, bought a mic on Amazon, and just use the podcast as an extension of those Monday thoughts. Of half of it was like, hey, we're going through this time. We're young. Let's figure it out. We're figuring it out together. And then the other half was expanding on concepts that, you know, I wasn't fully familiar with. So it was like half rambling and half just like a soft emission, but not too concrete. And then, like I said, once I found my first guest, it was guests only from that point on. And now I've gone back to solo episodes, which is interesting. You know, I like them. It's a different animal for sure. But yeah, man, I started with that. And then on episode 8, I had a friend be like, hey, you should just change this, dude. Like, you should make it like your show. And I'm like, all right, what do you think I should call it? He's like, call it BopCast. I'm like, BopCast. Okay, that sounds good. And I just changed it, man. Episode 8. So it's been BopCast ever since. It's evolved, you know, into kind of fitting a little bit of a different audience now. But that's really the evolution of the podcast.
Yeah, which is so cool because I think people overthink the planning of a podcast now. With the good fortune of just creating a show and having it have some success, I've had enough people just inbound ask me for support, whether it's locally and they're very much just starting, like a high school kid at a school that I'm dropping in to help out in, or friends, family, or people online with bigger brands asking, you know, like, what do you have any ideas how I could start, or these sorts of tips? And I think a lot of us overthink that. And I actually had the opportunity to talk to John Lee Dumas a couple weeks ago, and he was the one that talked me into, he was the third person to bring it up, but he was finally the one that I listened to start adding solos. And for the longest time, I was like, I didn't want to mess with the vibe and the brand and the consistent message that this is an interview show, because I was raised on Art of Manliness, Tim Ferriss, Joe Rogan, and then later Rich Roll. It's like, we're going to sit across the table from each other. I'm going to ask you questions. And that format was what I knew, really. And Dave Meltzer was the first person to say you should really be uploading solos. I was like, thanks, but no thanks, in fairness, because I just wasn't appreciating why. And then John Lee Dumas really broke down the why for me and was like, and I don't even want it. He said, I don't even want your response. Like, just do it. And then, you know, in 6 months, let me know how it's going. And by far and away, they're all the most downloaded episodes.
Wow.
People reach out to mention that they really liked the episodes, that kind of thing. The actual podcast algorithm grabs them somewhat, and people listen that I hadn't expected. Whereas with the interview shows, I can kind of know who's going to listen and that kind of thing. So that part was really interesting. I thought it was going to be confusing, but I've been excited to be doing them. So I can really relate to what you're saying that regard.
If you don't mind me asking, how was the recording side of that, like you going in? Because for me, I thought I was going to do a 15-minute episode and it ended up being 45, and I had no idea. I just completely lost track of time. Like, it still ended up being okay, but how was the recording side of it for you?
Let me ask a question first back, and because I think that'll help too. When you mentioned that you had the webcam set up, were you making video and audio? Mm-hmm. Or a bit of both, or what?
Always, yeah, from the beginning. Now, I did take a stint off video, which was interesting. Dude, everybody went to audio. Shout out to all my listeners, man, and all my watchers, because they all went to audio. It was fantastic. Like, it was really cool to see that I wouldn't really lose them. I probably definitely lost some. But my perspective on it's different now. I just believe that even if there's one person that wants to watch the video, just make it for them, you know. From there, it's gonna grow. But yeah, I did audio and video in the beginning, then just audio for a while, and then now I've brought back the video side. Especially with in person, you definitely need the video side.
Yeah, for sure. And so for me with the interviews, we always have the video. With the solos, though, the first episode, back to your original question, I was trying to really multitask. And this is one of my faults, you know, like our strengths that become faults. Like the first time I ever tried to stream live, I streamed to Twitch, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and LinkedIn. Like I went everywhere, right? And it was actually Buster. Yeah, and it was actually Buster who was like, dude, just go live to one platform and then go live a different time to another platform and do them for shorter amounts of time and connect to the vibe that's on that platform. Don't overthink it. And I really have appreciated that advice ever since, because I'm always trying to do too much, I guess, is so to speak, right? So I was setting up the webcam and doing the things to make sure that this could basically be a YouTube video, right? Mm-hmm. And it's also a podcast. And I found that I was rambling. I was having a little bit of a tough time figuring out how much to script, how much to not script, like bullet points versus full script. And I think both of those, one was too little, one was too much. So there's like this Goldilocks thing for me, for sure. And I've figured it out, but I can create consistently and make it quality when it's audio and I'm not distracted by a camera. So for those solos, for now, it's been audio. And to answer your question, I've been able to get them to where they're between 5 and 15 minutes, and like doing the hard work of just not saying anything extra. Yeah. And also appreciating, this was a hard part, appreciating that I have so many topics. Like in the bullet points right now, there's probably 1,000 episodes.
Yeah.
in my ideas doc, right? Like, so appreciating that for the interviews, they're going to be long. People can take deep dives into these great conversations with awesome people. But for the solos, you know, if they're doing that 10-minute drive to the grocery store, they can probably get the episode in. And so I've just tried to really force myself that if I feel like those bullet points are going to go beyond the quality over quantity level, then I'll just cut it and shift it down in my script to a new episode.
That's so how
it's been okay.
No, that's good. No, I that's great for me as well to hear how you do it, because I mean, that's typically what I'm suggesting to clients too. Have your topics, but be able to ramble within the topic if you're going to do post production. Like, get it all out. Like, most likely, you're not going to be able to guess what you're going to say exactly, right? So yeah, that balance is takes time, but it's definitely possible to find. And there's some great people to look up to for this. I mean, you know, Andrew Huberman is fantastic. I wouldn't suggest doing 2.5-hour solos, but like just the fact that just to see how that guy does it, like, it's incredible. And yeah, there's some really great examples of that. But then on the other side, I couldn't see Joe Rogan doing a solo ever, you know, like, so
right.
It's interesting. You got to find what works for you. But I also do a third version called The Shit Show. And that's with my friend, or myself and my producer. And we're doing one tonight. Typically, we take audience questions. But something told me this week, I'm like, I just don't know. I feel like we should just go. We do an hour. We'll have maybe some topics set up. We'll take some audience questions and videos and stuff. But like, we just do what we want with it, and we just experiment. And it gives me that, like, I don't promote it. I just release it. I don't care who watches it. It's literally just for us. But I think having that there too, for me, at least personally, has given me another perspective on, like, or really the opportunity to just kind of flow when I'm with a guest, I don't want to talk too much. When I'm solo, I don't want to go too far into any direction. So this also third version is we have some diehard listeners who really love it, and most of the audience doesn't consume it, and that's cool. But yeah, it's you don't want to ever be in a box with content, in my opinion, you know.
For sure. And the other part of my conversation with JLD was around that idea of, as the audience grows, you know, you got interviews, you got solos. As the audience grows, then here are the other formats we can add. And so that AMA and Q&A, and then doing a guest or a roundtable conversation with a few topics, like all those things I'm excited to do in the future. But for now, focusing on the two, just to mention another couple references that people could use too, that really helped me. You mentioned Huberman. I mean, that was what I was scared of ending up doing because of how much research and time. And that's my style for sure, which is why I was originally scared of doing solos, was because like, I don't have the time, right? I need to pick my priorities. Once realizing the other smaller version, not Huberman. And what helped me with that was Jocko Willink. So in Jocko's, a lot of times it's an interview show, but he'll have like intros or outros that are about, you know, that 5 to 10 minute mark on a topic. And so him doing those that are that mid-level of ranting, but also clearly he has a few bullet points and is reading a bit. I've really appreciated those. The other is James Altucher. And the reason why he helped me a lot was because his episode cards. One of the things that I was worried about was having people get confused in the apps, like in the podcast players, right? So you're in Spotify and you're like, oh, I want to listen to Justin's show. And I've seen this happen of standing over someone's shoulder where they're like, how do I listen to your show? And they go to look at it and then they get confused between the episode types. So having empathy for that, because that really frustrates me to the point where I'd probably tune out of someone's whole brand.
Yeah.
James Altucher has blue, or at the time had like bright blue for solo business tips and white for interviews.
Smart.
And so those images, like I can just flip through.
But that only works
you're
on
driving,
Spotify though, so you're not getting that on the 70% of the other, which is probably 70% of your listeners on the other platforms. But yeah, no.
Which is really interesting you say that. And that's why I said episode cards and titles, because I had to learn that titling was probably the part that can be equally valuable. And right. So like mine's like interview 32 with Brendan Kane, or, you know, interview 31 with Jess Sully. Like it's like that kind of thing. And then you can clearly tell the solos are solos because it's like, you know, how I played football and I regret it, or like whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I do the guest image too for the guests. So like the solo thumbnails and the solo, you know, kind of graphics, like any graphic that's not a guest looks completely different. So I haven't even thought about that, but I technically do that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting you say that it only works for Spotify, because I didn't know that, because I use Spotify and Amazon primarily. But then when I saw it on the Apple one, it was like, they were all blending together again. And
Apple doesn't innovate, dude. Apple doesn't innovate.
Yeah.
They innovate everything else except that. But that's another conversation.
Yeah. So we'll see in the future if that ends up changing. But for now, I think at least, and then the timing's such a big difference that it really does. People can understand just by that. How long's the episode? Oh, 11 minutes. Okay.
Dude, mine are 2 hours, so it's fun. You got to go in if you want to go in, but we have timestamps and stuff.
Yeah.
Make it easy.
Yeah, for sure. And that's awesome. So, I mean, maybe let's stick with podcasting for a second, because we've taken a deep enough dive into this topic. When it comes to the business part for a second, like maybe tell us what your business is. Clearly it's in the world of podcasting, but what exactly is it, you know, for people who don't know?
Yeah, so we're a podcast consulting and launch company, essentially, but it's really two sides of it. So one side is consulting, which is consulting with current podcasters to break their limiting beliefs and to make sure that they don't stop, which is very, very common in podcasting, as you know. So that's really my goal there. And then the other side of the consulting is just helping people launch their show. So we have a process and a system that we built over the past 3 years to essentially, it works for everybody. And because it uses fundamentals of podcasting. And so we wanted to create a system that could work for a solopreneur, could work for probably a Fortune 500 company, because at the end of the day, there is always a host or a host and a guest. Like there's always one person doing it for the most part, or co-host. But even if you have a Fortune 500 company launching a podcast, there might be 30 people involved, but there's still that one host, right? Or those two hosts. So we developed the podcast launch system called the Podcast Launch Accelerator. That's a 5-step system that we created. So that's the consulting side, the helping podcasters grow and evolve, and then helping people launch. And then the other side is the production side. So that's your audio production, video, graphics. Really the goal there with all of that, everything we do, I really want to democratize podcasting. I want to make it, it's very fragmented in terms of, what I mean by that is there's not a lot of trusted sources. Like everything's really spread out. Like, are my stats here accurate? Are my stats there accurate? Is this site legit? Is that like, nobody knows what's legit, what's not. So I just want to make it easier for people to launch their podcast and continue it with like using fundamentals. And then on the production side, I just want affordable production that isn't like using Upwork or hiring a bunch of freelancers or anything like that. I want to basically take the beauty of having an agency and the simplicity for hobbyist / like the top of the hobbyist category and the beginning of like the I'm getting paid for my podcast category. So that's essentially what we do with the business.
And so when you say podcast fundamentals, I love to create blog posts from each episode, and there'll either be 1 or 2 sections depending on the guest, but that are very kind of pragmatic, top 10 steps to starting a business or top 10 ways to use live video for marketing. When we look at that podcast fundamentals, this is something that you're a really big expert in. So what are some of those things somebody who's brand new starting a show should think about?
Well, first of all, specificity. So a top 10 XYZ is not specific. It's not because you're just saying top 10. That's like the top 10 cars. It's like, but there's 14,000 cars. So which one, so I think like where people get caught up is they don't, it's like business. Like they don't want to not serve somebody. So then they go broad. I think how you build an audience is to go specific. And then once you have the audience, then you could go broad. Basically the opposite of what I did. I don't recommend doing what I did. I went broad first. It ends up being a little more difficult that way. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like fundamentals, like if you're going to start a show, first of all, it's why, right? Like, why am I doing this? Because you don't know the work that it's going to be. I mean, you could literally outsource everything except the recording, and you're still going to be like, wow, I didn't realize it was like this much work that I had to do to keep this thing going. So that's why you got to have a strong why, strong foundation. If you don't have that strong foundation, you're going to stop, you're going to quit. Every single person, almost not every single person, most people that talk to me, who give me like, I'm pretty good at breaking down objections, but if people say like, I don't know, or like, I'll let you know, or they don't, those are not the people that do this. It's the people who just make a decision right then and there. They know it's best for them, and then they go ahead and do it. So, it's really a mindset thing with podcasting. If you've done something for a long time before and you just did it day in and out, day out, year in and year out, decade in, decade out, you're going to be really good for podcasting. So, those are the things that I like to recommend to people of like, I always preface podcasting with the work before I get into the benefits, because you don't get any of the benefits without that work anyway. So that's what I tell people before going in. Like, it's not going to destroy your life. It's just going to be a part of your life. And it's going to be a part of your schedule, and it's a commitment to see results. So if you can't commit for a year, I don't know about this. You know what I'm saying? Like, or you can't commit to a season, or you're a little bit up in the air of how you're going to do it, how you're not going to do it. Don't expect pro results with amateur execution, right? So that's what I always say. But yeah, man, when people are going in, hey, I want to start a podcast. Cool. Let's talk about it. Why? That's where we start.
Mm-hmm. And any tips or tricks to not pod fade, as I heard Ariel Nissan Black call it, or, let's just say it, to not give up, that helps people going? What are the things that you advise people in that area?
Outsource the things that you don't like doing. If you're making $8K a month from your job, take $400 from that and outsource the audio editing for every month, right? Or whatever, like whatever the thing is that you hate to do, that's probably giving you resistance from actually wanting to even do the podcast. Like, I would consider outsourcing that. Even if it's the lowest level freelancer you can find on Upwork, you can train them, you can, whatever it ends up being. Like, it's not the approach I recommend, but it works, and I'm down with whatever works. But yeah, that's what I would say, man. Like, definitely, where people go wrong, I think, is a couple reasons. But one of them is beliefs, right? Like they don't believe that if they continue to do it, it's going to work. They just think it's not working. And then I ask, how do you know it's not working? They're like, I don't have that many downloads. I'm like, how many do you have? They're like, I have 100 per episode. Okay, so what was your goal? Well, I didn't have one. Okay, so did you know that 100 downloads an episode is like top 3% of all podcasts? Oh, well, no, I didn't know that. Well, I'm like, yeah, well, because most podcasts fail because they get 100 episodes and think they're failing. So
Right.
It's the mindset thing. Like if you're at 100, like if you have one client, do you just go, well, I only have one? No, you go try to get another one. So that's how I take it with podcasting, is like if you didn't define your goals in the beginning, that's what makes it really difficult. Because I have people come to me who could have monetized, who's quit their podcast 6 months ago. They could have had making thousands a month from it right now. Nobody told them that. So,
And I think those are two of the big things that you just touched on in one response, the double M's, as I call it, and the idea of marketing and monetization. And I mean, you can take both those prompts and kind of spit on those topics right now if you want, or I can kind of break them down a little bit. But I think the main thing is like, how do I get more listeners is such a debated topic, even in the world of podcasting, let's call it experts. If you hopped on a round table with 9 other people who are podcast leaders, I'm sure we could debate what would be some good next steps. So maybe what do you think about in the area of marketing? And then when it comes to monetization, you mentioned earlier that we give away our secrets because people aren't going to use them anyways. Well, let's assume that maybe some person will listen to this and use some of the secrets. So secrets to marketing and monetization, what do you touch on there?
Well, I'll preface this whole thing with saying, like, I don't love when people are like, yeah, man, I know a guy and he made 6 figures from his podcast because he had somebody on the podcast that bought 6 figures worth of stuff from him. And now the podcast, I don't use examples like that. I would rather just use me. Okay, so let's use me. What am I doing? I'm doing about 1 to 3 vertical video clips a week on my podcast, okay? I have 500 audio downloads a month. I have 500 YouTube views a month. That's 1,000 listeners and watchers a month. I'm very cut and dry about my stats, about how my podcast works. If I wanted to increase my plays and downloads, right, wouldn't you think that if my 1 to 3 clips is working, that I would just go ahead and post 3 to 9 clips a week, right? Like I would increase what's already working, right? People will come to me and say, once again, my podcast has 100 downloads, man. Okay, how many posts a week do you make about it? Well, none. Okay, like we can start. Everybody wants the quick fix, you press button, make things happen. It's not the deal, dude. Like just if you found something that's working, that's rare, right? Because most things don't even work. So if you found that posting on LinkedIn about your podcast once a week is getting you an average amount of 30 to 40 downloads, then posting twice a week about it might double that number. Like I'm looking at like what we were talking about before, fundamentals. How do you take, this is business, right? Like I said, people in business, you have marketing, like they're not going to stop running ads. If the ads don't work, they improve the ads. If you put out that 1 post a week and it doesn't work, that means the post isn't good. Make a better post. And then if you can't make a better post, hire somebody else to help you, So everybody wants this like big thing that's going to work, whether it's marketing, monetization. I believe everything that works, truly. I don't do SEO. Somebody else does. There's many case studies of SEO working. I'm not that guy. I'm the content guy. So I stay in my lane, man. Like everything that's worked for somebody else can work for you, but it might not. I know how to talk about organic content. I know how to make that work. I know how to get 400, 500, 1,000 views on your first episode on YouTube. Like I could tell you how to do that. And it literally is way more simple than anybody wants it to be. It's like stupid how simple it is. But I don't talk about tactics that I haven't done personally, but that's how I'll kind of start that off with the marketing and monetization. Like it's really about what works and then just doubling or tripling that. And then once we're at a higher level, we'll go from there. Right. But.
And so the monetization specifically, you mentioned that someone quit when they didn't realize that they could have monetized already, plus the kind of braggadocious. So I made 100K of this off that. So in I guess, pragmatic terms for people who are like, oh, when should I monetize or how long does it take? And of course, that's contextual to industry and those kinds of things.
Yeah.
However, again, you meet someone who's just getting started, who's already stressed about the idea of the second M in monetization. what insights or wisdom do you have for them?
I'd say don't worry about that. I'd say just like if nobody's listening to it, you already have a big issue. Like you already have a big challenge. Get over that. Who monetizes without an audience? Like you can't, like you don't sell a product without marketing because nobody will know about it, you know? So I like fill the top of your funnel. That's where I'm at, dude. Like don't worry. If you want to design a show to make money, I bet you can. Like I can probably help you do that. But if you don't have a way to get at least your current listener / audience or new audience in the door, how is a sponsor going to care about your 12 downloads? Like once you have leverage, you're trying to build leverage, right? So once you have 500 downloads a month plus, now you can say, hey, this company's going to give me this. I love to work with you guys. Here's the offer, right? Like you, instead of going, can you be my sponsor? Like I have about 12, but it'll definitely be growing. Like that's not how business works, man. So that's why I relate it back to music. There's music and there's business, and then there's the music business. The last word is what you want. Like that's what you got to look at, right? There's podcasting, there's business, and there's the podcasting business. Once we put those things together, now we're in the business world. Like now content's not the thing. Now we're looking at numbers, right? And metrics and things like that. So yeah, I don't even remember the original question, but that's where I ended up.
It all blends together, the idea of marketing and monetization. And you just hit the nail on the head with the idea of equating it to music business. I feel I was just having this conversation with somebody in the jail that I work in yesterday, because we often get talented, I'll say that, in a couple cases successful too, but definitely talented youth who are strong at hip hop. Yep. They're only going to serve a few years because they were youth when they committed their crimes. Yep. And they have a lot of potential for when they get out to actually succeed as an entrepreneur and with their music. But so often they lack that business piece. So this is a really good segue, because I don't want to let go of the hip hop and music thing too much. I mean, there's so many topics. If we did like a master class on how to succeed as a hip hop artist, which I just saw, it said pop artist, but that Monthly was advertising Charlie Puth, how to be a pop artist, how to succeed as a pop artist. That's like the online course or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those, certainly there's a curriculum and it's kind of can be broken down. So this is something that would be great to touch on. Maybe we could do the overarching, anything that comes to mind as I bring that up, and then go into some specific topics. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in terms of the music side of things, like I'll just say, like, before, if you have any, I could always go into what I do and kind of my like bio in terms of music, but it's really collaboration. Like Gary Vee told me to my face, like I literally met him in person. He told that to me to my face about how we can grow in music. Like it's talent. If you don't have talent, I don't know what to tell you. Keep working harder. I don't know. You're not going to get recognized even if you do have talent. So you're not going to get recognized just by being recognized. Like you or somebody's going to have to do something to make that happen. The same reason people stop podcasting is the same reason they stop making music, and the same reason they end their business. And it's all really the same. It's lack of belief and lack of not hitting probably some nefarious goal. But I've found for me, what's keeping my juices flowing is being part of a community. I'm part of a community of musicians and rappers, specifically rappers and singers, called Mad Minds that we do here in New Jersey, that my friend Orhun runs. And, we have at our biggest shows, 300 to 500 people, all supporting independent artists. Dude, if I didn't have that, I probably wouldn't continue to release music, to be honest with you. So in the last 9 months to 2 years, that's been a massive, massive thing for me. And I don't think you have to do that in a mastermind setting or whatever, but if you can just get a few other artists who are also trying to make it with you, and then get a couple 1 to 2 mentors who are above you, that's the power play that will make sure that you don't stop that thing, right? That's what I do for podcasters is I'm like a person they can just talk to, and I go, hey, why didn't you upload that and stuff, right? You should do the same thing for music. But yeah, willing to talk about what I do and, my background in music. But I just think that's a powerful lesson that I've recently learned.
And that lesson runs through much of this episode, because you referenced your friend doing YouTube with you, being in the gym, the person who introduced you to hip hop.
Oh yeah.
All these things, that's obviously a common theme for you, is the idea of friendship and collaboration and community. So we know that that's how you got into hip hop, for sure. Where does it exist now? Let's go into that. Like you said, kind of the bio for it and what you have done in that world first, before we talk a little bit about the technical production side.
Yeah, I think, where it started for me was that diss track back in high school. And from there, I made an EP, and then I made an album. The album did pretty good for like my fan base. We had a couple songs that got picked up on some, like, there's not like really blogs anymore, but they're kind of like Instagram pages for music. So I had a little like pop with that a little bit, which was fun. That was like in 2018, 2019. And then, man, I just kind of like let my life, everything else I let take over. COVID hit. I wasn't doing the in-person shows. Like, I set a goal to perform in, I think it was 2019, and I ended up hitting that goal, and I performed X amount of times. I think it was like 3 or 4 times or something like that. The first goal I set was to perform once. Then I did that. Then I'm like, I'm going to perform 3 times, and you just move from there. Then COVID, lost all my motivation for that, shifted all my focus to my business. And then I kind of woke up one day and realized, wow, I haven't done anything with music. And I also realized that business was becoming my outlet too. Like, the people I was working with, my girlfriend was also my outlet more. Like, I always use music because I felt like I didn't have anybody. And now I have people. So I'm like, oh, wait, like, I'm not like super lonely anymore. So I'm not going to make the same music. And then it kind of ended up, I had to think about what place I want it to be in my life. And now I am 100% okay with it just being a thing that I love to do and love to make. My aspirations were world tour and, the whole nine, all the musical aspirations. And like, if it happens, great. If it doesn't, I'm not really working towards that. Like, I really just want to enjoy it and love it and kind of treat it like I would these other hobbies that I have. If the music pops off tomorrow and I have the ability to open for people and continue to and travel and tour and everything, I'm not saying I won't drop everything to do that. But I really have to make that decision of like, where do you want this thing to be, man? Like, what do you want? How much energy and focus are you really going to put into this? Like, don't set these goals. Once again, for myself, like, a lot of what I say is for me, like, and selfishly, like, don't have pro level aspirations with amateur execution. That's what was happening. Like, I was working on songs twice a month and then twice a year, Right. And so now I'd really just have to make that decision of where I want this to be in my life. I want to perform and I want to make it when I want to make it. When I decide to take it to another level, I'll make that decision,
Even J. Cole talks about that in his like mini documentary, The Off Season, about originally when he first wanted to succeed in hip hop, and his boys were like, yo, what are you doing? Like, you haven't done anything in the last 2 years. And then him succeeding, obviously, but then even that happening again after reaching fame and money and fortune, starting a family, But then being like, yo, wait, what am I doing? And it happened again, a midlife crisis, being like, okay, I need to recommit to just being in the studio 6 hours every day or whatever your own plan is. So I think that's a pretty special example. So is yours. When you think about that workflow, though, this is the part where I love breaking it down like we did with podcasting secrets. But a lot of times it's tough to become the teacher when we're so skilled and qualified in an area. Yeah. And in this case, being a hip hop artist and creating hip hop music, let's just call it that.
Yeah.
But what's the workflow like for you to create a track if you want to put something out next month?
Yeah, if I want to put something else next month, I have one producer that's really my go-to. I started producing myself. I would recommend to everybody, not that you have to rely on yourself for your beats and your music, but 100% learn it, because when you're in the studio and they're making decisions and you don't know what the hell they're talking about, and you don't have a say. So you got to be educated to have a say. So learn beats, learn production. If you can, learn tracking, recording, mixing, mastering, releasing, promotion, distribution, management, learn the whole thing, read the books, right? There's many influencers, Wendy Day's one of them, James Landry. There's so many on Instagram and all these other platforms that literally just teach you game. Jen's the guru. It goes on and on. There's many of these guys, but I would say, guys and gals, learn it all. Learn as much as you can. Just learn how beats get made, learn how tracks get mixed, learn how they get mastered. Do a few of them yourself. You don't have to do it for yourself, but do it so you know it. From there, you're going to want a team, right? And this will come up, this will lead to where I'm at now. But I met this producer probably in 2018, 2019 on Instagram off a DM. and we've been working together ever since. We've done many songs together. We're doing an album together. It's just super slow on my end. But now I have that. He makes beats that I would have made way better than I would have ever made them.
Right.
So I got lucky on that. I'm not saying that
Can
was
you
me.
shout him out?
Yeah, Jello Music. Yeah. Okay. So he's great. Jello's fantastic. He's got a full-time job. He's got, he has a great job, and he makes music on the side, and he's hustling. Incredibly talented. He was a concert pianist, transitioned to music production. I mean, literally fairy tale fucking story with this guy. And so I found him, and I said, this is it, man. I love this guy. I love his beats. They fit me so perfectly. So I have him. I got a couple other people I work with as well. So if I want to go to a studio, I have a studio that I can go to, and we'll make music from scratch. We did a song together. Not this single, but the one I'm releasing in December will be with them. That's More Face Studios in Red Bank, New Jersey. They're great. I'll work with them too. So now I have people. Now I have access, right? I do all my own management, all my own promotion, all my own booking, right? All that stuff. That's the next level for me, because I'm treating it like business, right? I used to sit and figure out, how do I do email marketing, and sit there on YouTube. Now I pay a guy $250 for an hour, and he just tells me what to do. That's what I want for music now, right? And that's where I'm at in my career. And when you're coming up as an artist, if you're not moving the needle and somebody else isn't moving it for you, then nothing's happening. Like, nothing will ever happen. Nothing will just happen to you. It's all a matter of what somebody's doing for you, or what you're doing for your own brand. So that's the level I'm at. I got a producer. I literally have shows that I can go to and perform at to get practice. And then the next level for me seems to be management. So that's what I'm focused on right now, personally.
Managing yourself, but being able to get management.
Oh yeah. I don't want to manage myself. What I'm saying is I want to delegate the same thing I would do for my podcast, which is outsource my audio, outsource my show notes. I want to treat music the same way. I know I'm not going to manage myself. I can't. I do it now, and I suck, and I don't want to do it. So if I don't have to, I already found a producer that believes in me, that is willing to work with me, and because he knows like what the future can be. And yeah, I'm now in search. I'm not like interviewing people, but somebody's going to end up managing me, and it's just going to come. It's just going to happen.
I got you.
You know,
it's funny you say that, because we're not talking business right now, and I can already say I'm not going to end up doing it. But a lot of times, because I have youth come through the prison who are really could be successful, and they really need management, but they can't afford it, I've often been like, shit, I should just manage this kid and help them just as a mentor or nothing else, get connections and figure out that sort of like start creating and that stuff. Basically what ended up happening with some other like big time artists who have succeeded, where they're like, that was kind of that turning point, that like that was the big thing that changed it all. Once they had someone that was out there promoting them, because they weren't up for self promotion. That happens all the time for the youth that I'm referring to. The other thing that happens is they just don't create and publish enough. And that's one of the things that can be, kind of frustrating, because again, to your point, if it's an outlet and you don't have the goals of needing to go viral soon or get attention, then sure, whatever, that's fine. But when they're getting frustrated that they're not getting the attention, and like you said with podcasting, they're posting once every 2 months or less, It's like, okay, well, we're going to have to up the volume game a little bit. But I want to pump the brakes for a sec and go back to beats, because you referenced the idea of, learn it a bit yourself at first. So when you were starting, were you just downloading off of YouTube, getting them off of anywhere you could, or like what was getting the beats part at first for you?
Yeah, first there was no recording. So since we didn't do any recording, we would just play beats, any beats, Mac Miller, J. Cole, YouTube, whatever. Then I had a mentor named Beej Links, and he works for Diddy now. You want to talk multi-talented, multi-passionate? It's this guy. He's been on tour with G-Eazy. He works for Diddy. He's a graphic designer. He's a clothing designer. He's a music producer. He's a singer. He like does it all type of guy. He was one of our mentors. DM'd him on Instagram. He was like, yeah, come by my studio. And we paid for his time, and he gave us advice. And he said, everybody thinks their bars are dope. So for anybody listening, run that one back, right? They're not as dope as you think they are. So that was a big piece. And then really I just asked him, I said, what do you use? Like, what do you do? He goes, Mac, get a Mac, get Logic Pro. So I got a Mac, and I got Logic Pro, and I just didn't take anybody else's advice, and I just took one person's advice, and I got a Mac and I got Logic Pro, and I learned it. I figured out how to make beats. Now I had a music background, so I kind of hit the ground running. Not that I was making fire at the first, the first few beats, but I came back to him in a year with a fully formed album of 12 songs, so that was written, produced, and made by me. So, I just put that work in and night out of learning, of going on YouTube. How do I use the sampler? How do I use the synth? How do I EQ this to make it sound different and gain stage it and all that stuff? So we weren't recording, but once I started recording after working with Beej, I knew that I needed beats because his beats were $500 a beat, $1,000 a beat. So that forced me to have to learn it. And then, now I could afford beats, or now, like I said, I just work with my producer. Now I just make beats. Like, I just want to need a beat, want to make a beat, I just make one, have fun with it. But yeah, I would suggest getting in there. It doesn't matter. Fruity Loops, Ableton, Pro Tools, Logic. It literally doesn't matter what you use. Don't let anybody tell you that it matters, because it doesn't. It just depends on your personality. Logic works for me. Apple works for me. So that's what I use. But yeah, man, that's how it started for me. Just the necessity of not being able to afford the beats that I wanted. I could afford a YouTube beat, but I couldn't stand the fact that somebody else was going to use that beat. So I did it myself.
That was super serendipitous timing, this interview, because when just this week, the youth I work with, we downloaded the Pro Tools sample and the Logic Pro trial. And we're like, okay, well, we can try both of them for 30 days and then we'll just pick one. And Pro Tools is definitely already we're already I look at, the student, I'm like, yeah, this is what we're going with, because it just looks simpler, right? And clearly it's good enough. I heard that I'm in Love with a Stripper was made on GarageBand. So if GarageBand's good enough to make that, track that's been viewed 60 million times or whatever on YouTube, then I think Pro Tools will be good enough, or Logic Pro will be good enough, for us to create music Logic, on in the jail.
Logic's the more simple program, I think, just easier to learn. Pro Tools is more probably long term. Like, if you see yourself working in studios, you go to a studio, here's my Mac with Logic, they don't do that. They go Pro Tools, or maybe you can use Ableton, but basically Pro Tools. So if you're going to do bedroom shit, Logic's great. Listen, go watch the YouTube video with Billie Eilish and her brother making that song that I forget what it's even called. It doesn't matter. That whole album. Just watch the video of when they do the duh 150 times. He's just using Logic, man. I've been in these studios. I've seen people use every single thing that you could think of, and as long as you get to the final product, man, doesn't matter. Just get started, But yeah, that's really great that you guys are doing that. You'll love Logic. There's so much to it. You can do everything with it. It's fun. It's color coded.
Yeah, it just does seem more fun. And so I guess, we got to kind of get to the point where we wrap someday, and sometime we'll run it back. But I do want to just say, in terms of a bullet point or something that you feel gets people caught up when it comes to specifically the beat making, the music part, building the tracks so that they can then put the lyrics to them. What are some, what's something that you think would hold someone up from getting going with beats? Or if you had one piece of advice,
just finish the beat. Just say it's done. If you need help, if you can't finish a beat, have somebody else listen to it and just say, is this done or not? Most of what you're doing is not adding. Music is a lot of subtraction, right? It's because you can add anything that you want. That's easy. But can you have just the right amount of pieces in the perfect places to make it a coherent song? So where people get caught up, where I get caught up, is I just don't finish it. So set your deadline, bounce that out, and lock it down and be like, this is done, it's over. And then set your freaking release date, because if you don't set that, it's going to be like where I'm at, which is I'm releasing my video 3.5 years later. So that's my advice for that.
And that's where I'm going to be, to send you texts every so often to push you, for sure, because I think it can be so hard, but it's just do it, because then you'll get to the next one anyways, I
appreciate that. I'll take it. I'll take all I can get.
Yeah, 100%. I'll do that. The next thing naturally is writing. And you mentioned bringing your whole album back to the producer that was your mentor, that you looked up to, and you had the 12 tracks done. So I'm assuming you wrote and recorded those as well. When it comes to writing and then recording, what's your process for that?
Yeah, so writing is typically starts when an idea and you really a line but I experiment. So, for example, I'll do one where I set a goal for the song, set that at the top of my page in my notebook. I have a big notebook over here, not something small like this, like a writing pad, like a drawing pad. And I'll set the goal of the song. Like, for example, one of them is I met my friend Asher Roth, who is like a pretty prominent rapper from like 10 years ago. He was really popping, still makes great stuff. That was a really cool moment for me because he's like, I always look up to him in music. So, for example, for that song, I write the goal. I met Asher Roth. Okay, now that's the goal. Then I'll go ahead and write the story, not try to rhyme it, just write what happened. So now I have about 3 pages of written story. Then I'll flip to the next page and start creating a song out of that story in sections. So now I'll take the story and go, what are the logical sections of this story, right? Because a song is a story, whether it is or not, right? It goes up. It's going to lead you to something. It's going to make you want to get to the end of it because you want to know what's going to happen. It's going to have like kind of a climax in the middle, and then it's going to come back down. And, we could go nitty gritty on song structure, but I look at it like, okay, now how can I arrange this story? Do I tell the end of the beginning? What's the format I want? Then I'll throw it in the format and jot that down. And then I'll start actually writing the actual lyrics of the song. So that's one example of a way you can do it with a process or a system. I learned that in songwriting class. I took a songwriting class. I learned songwriting. Before this, I would literally just write the song. There's no questions asked. Sometimes I still do. And another thing I'd say, the most popular things that, or what I do the most is taking one idea and then just rapping it, like just getting on the mic with the beat and just going. Most songs don't come without the beat, in my opinion. Or another cheat code is to take your favorite song of today, get the instrumental version of it and write a verse out and use that verse to then write an actual song. But those are just a few ways that I do it. And there's no one way that I do it. It's kind of whatever I'm feeling for that track.
That's huge. Some positive feedback for you in terms of being an interviewee. I really appreciate how those were like 3 literally tangible things that anyone wanting to start hip hop today could get started. And it took you like 90 seconds to rattle them off. So I'm really grateful for segments like that. It really does help, right? Like they can pragmatically go start doing that now. Would you say then that you are more of a verse person than a hook person? Because I do notice you didn't bring up anything about a hook.
Oh, all verses all day, dude. Yeah. But now I take the advice of, it's kind of similar to managing by wandering around. I kind of take that concept and apply it to music. It's like singing by wandering around. Like I just sing. I have a great hallway out here and it has great reverb and I'll just sing there. So whenever I walk, I just sing a song that I'm listening to that day. Whenever I'm just like walking around my house. So that's really what I do for hooks because the verses come so much easier to me. And then once you do enough hooks, you will actually start just making hooks and you'll actually just your brain will start thinking of hooks. So yeah, man, always verses. It was always verses. It was always my bars are sick. But guess what, guys? Like it's not Post Malone's verses that are why he's Post Malone, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that for me, I've learned, I was about to say so little, which would be the complete wrong thing to say. I've learned so much about hip hop, about writing music, about poetry, about song structure, about all these things. But I know little in the sense that I have no musical background. I have done nothing outside of my day job in terms of pursuing this. But one thing that I've noticed is like, oh, you start to pick up on these songs are commercially successful. Russ is another example, I think, that you see that, right?
I could go on a tangent about Russ. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you see like, and then you start to, we've seen so many documentaries of different hip hop artists doing their thing. First of all, everyone's process is different, but you see someone like Jay-Z who like literally just hums, and then from humming comes a hook, and then from humming off of that hook comes a verse. And then you see someone like Eminem where it's like he's got like the folder or the box of every little story he's written, very similar to your process, right? And it's just an interesting thing to see. Everyone's different.
Yeah, that I heard on a podcast recently about both of them. So it is the truth that Jay-Z doesn't write. And this was from a podcast I was listening to about somebody who was in the studio with him. I can't remember what artist, but I'm pretty sure they asked. It could have been artist producer. If I remember, I'll let you know. But they were saying that it's Rick Rubin. Yeah, how could I forget? So this is both from Rick Rubin. This is, I believe he was talking to Joe. But he was like, yeah, Jay-Z will literally just spit it. Like he'll just say it. Like it's in his head. He has it all written in his head. And then Eminem, he saw M writing something. He was like, what are you doing? He was like, oh, I'm just writing. He was like, a song? He's like, no. He said, I just need to write. And M just writes all day. Whatever's happening, he's just writing. Anything that could excite him at all to keep that habit of writing. So look at that dichotomy of the most successful rappers of all time. Completely different approach, right? So yeah, you're gonna have to find what works for you for sure, but those are two great examples.
Yeah, 100%. And we could go on all day about that. Like I said, we will definitely be, bringing this episode back in the future. You mentioned really subtly that you got advice from Gary Vee. I'd love to know, because I'm sure that leaks into all of the things you do in the world of business, music, all these goals you have, I'm sure, because if you're a Gary Vee fan, I know that I am, then it kind of helps you in many aspects of life. But if you wanted to share quickly how you met him, and then if you have any thoughts on what that meant to you, I think that would be good to turn some people onto his work.
Yeah, I'd say definitely go watch a lot of the old Gary Vee material. I just think it doesn't have a lot of the NFT kind of tinge and kind of this new age of content. A lot of the stuff now is very relevant. But I just think there's more value in his old stuff. There's more fundamentals. But yeah, so a friend of mine was on his wine texting list. He has this thing called Wine Text to get deals on wine. He was like, hey, I'm going to be here at my dad's liquor store in New Jersey at Wine Library. And my friend's like, you want to go? I know how much you love Gary Vee. I'm like, yeah, let's go. So we went 2019, pull up, take a picture with him. His right-hand man, D-Rock's right there. D-Rock's like, sorry, man, can't ask him a question. You got to go to the back of the line. Like, all right, so I go to the back of the line again. I get to the front of the line again. I'm like, Gary, I'm asking you a question. Anyway, I asked him a question. I said, hey, we got this collective of artists, right? We're all trying to come up together, grow together. What do we do? And he was like, well, it's like the Avengers, man. You have Iron Man, then you have the Avengers or whatever. I don't even know if that's an Avenger, but the point was you have these people that come together as a group for a movie, and then they have spinoffs in their individual movies, right? So it's kind of the same concept. So that was the question I asked. That was the answer he gave. I'm sitting in my business management class about 3 months later, and I get about 100 notifications on my phone. And his team posted that video of me asking him the question. It's got like 900,000 views. It's long gone and forgotten now in the archives of his Instagram account. But yeah, I mean, over probably 1 million people saw me ask him that question, which was really interesting. I ripped that comment section up, man. I replied to every comment. Mad people, dude, you knew the answer to that question, bro. Yeah, I did. That's why I asked him the question, so his team would post it, because it was such a layup for him. So that was me using Gary Vee's techniques on Gary Vee and getting his team to post it. But yeah, man, in terms of that, like, I just, I feel like Kanye fans. I'm like, I want the old Kanye. Like, I want the old Gary Vee, man. Like, I just took so much value. Now I just use his posts to get top comments so people can find me. So, I mean, I love his content still. I'm just not a mad, crazy consumer of it. Daily V was massive for me, and he just doesn't really bring that same kind of energy anymore, I don't think. But yeah, man, he's great.
I can agree with that. Empathize for sure. I feel like part of that is similar to what you said earlier in the episode, and when we talked about books, that it changes because we change, and so our need for those things changes, and that's probably a lot of it too. And we'll never really know because we can't have the same experience as we did.
He should change, though. I'm not mad at him. I just think he's serving the people where I was at. Like, I'm way ahead of all the stuff he talks about now because I'm literally doing it. So it's exactly like, now I need the mentor of whoever, the Alex Hormozy, which has been like the replacement person for me. Another great solo podcaster as well. 6 years he was podcasting before he got to top 50, which is another one.
Yeah, that kind of longevity and stick with itness, I think, is really valuable and interesting. I just finished editing and going to upload my episode with Brendan Kane, who's obviously a big marketing dude, wrote 1 million followers, helped Taylor Swift early on. And one of the answers that he gave was for people to check out Lil Nas X's pursuit of getting that first song to blow up. Right. And that idea that it'd be like how many millions of people gave up instead of doing what he did, who were at the same level he was. And that's just those types of things are super inspiring. Again, I feel like we could go on all day. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but certainly before I ask kind of the rapid fire theme questions, I would like to make sure that on these topics, I give you the opportunity to, if there's anything that you feel we didn't touch on or that you would have liked to drop, that give you an opportunity to mention if there's anything you think we left out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I definitely got caught up in some stories, so I don't know how much actionable. I know I got a few in there. But yeah, I mean, overall, like I would say this is your own journey. So people are not going to understand it, right? So if you are an artist, act like an artist. Be an artist then. Like, don't try to not be an artist. Oh, I'm an artist sometimes. Like, be an artist, right? Like, don't conform because you're not going to get anywhere. So I think it's hard because you do have to conform, right? Like, I'm in this situation right now, right? But I'm an artist. So like Kevin Gates, while he's in prison, just writing bangers. Freddie Gibbs, while he's accused of a crime he never even committed, he's writing songs. Like, very cliche for me to say this. I'm not in these positions, right? But what I'm saying truly, though, is figure out who you are as an artist and don't let anybody else who doesn't understand it. Like, these people are not going to remember you when you're dead. They don't care about you now either. Like, the people who care, lean into them. Like, those are the ones, those are your core group. But like, if you're going to do it, then do it. Like, if you're going to be an artist, right? And so that's just, off the top of my head. Like I said, everything I say is advice for me too. I do not give advice that I don't want to take. So that's advice for me to be like, I am still Sully Bop. I am still an artist. I got on stage last weekend and performed, right? Like, while I was on that stage, I was an artist right there, and everybody saw me as an artist, and they all respected me as an artist, So, but yeah, that's a little tidbit there to drop.
Yeah, I feel like you're gonna make me cry almost with that little piece and it was one of the only times that I'm like not looking at the camera and just kind of deep in reflection, maybe even missed the second half of what you said because having lost my brothers recently, and we were 3 brothers growing up with goals and teamwork, it's been very existential for me to go through that and be torn with this idea of, am I an artist or am I trying to build a business? And that's been really hard because when we spend time online or receiving other people's email marketing messages or collaborating with business leaders, it can be so difficult to not feel like we're doing things wrong if we aren't focused on the metrics that matter for business right now. And I know you mentioned that exact kind of thing with monetization earlier too. But another video I saw recently was Casey Neistat uploading about Kanye and his whole situation right now. And I don't know if you saw that, but for me, it was like, it's so funny because you said you want the old Kanye, a la the old Gary Vee. And I've been thinking a lot recently, I want the old Casey. And Casey Neistat basically posted like a video like he used to, in his office in New York City, just talking to the camera face on about a pretty impactful topic. It's the first time I've listened to watched a Casey Neistat video in like years. And he was saying that Kanye is an artist, and there are so few artists on YouTube and so few artists in the world of podcasting and so few artists in the world of music, because there are mostly people who just do things because they think it'll lead to a goal as opposed to being an artist. And so that's a long-winded way of me saying that I really appreciate you bringing that up randomly, because it's something that I've had to keep reminding myself. And I think I'm finally there where I'm like, nah, I can upload a YouTube video because it's a piece of art. I can put out a solo podcast episode because it's a piece of art, not because I'm worried if it'll lead to a sponsorship deal or something,
Yeah, you could sell. I mean, it's all self-titled. I mean, artists, you consider yourself an artist or you don't. That means you are or you're not. Like, there's not a course you got to take or a degree you have to have. You're kind of One if you decide you're one. Now, does that saturate the market? 100%. Just on Kanye for 10 seconds, Kanye would be, we wouldn't have an issue if Kanye would have just made music about all this stuff, right? He's an artist. He's not translating into the world. It's not happening because he's not translating through his medium, which is art, I think, personally. Now he's got his opinions, right? But put it in a song, Kanye.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it is in lots of other people's songs. So that's interesting, but it's a little more buried. Okay, one last thought. While we're on the topic of semi-controversial things that connect to the media, it's really bothered me when it comes to the Takeoff death, how the media just runs with stories like that and are like, oh, yay, you know, CNN, TMZ, we can celebrate Takeoff. And it's like, well, where were you to publish an article about the music that he made or anything awesome that he did charitably or anything like that? Nope, no articles for that. But he gets shot. Oh, that's cool. So we'll make some money off of that. And that is just a crazy world. Again, we could talk for hours about that topic, but it's hard to watch.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, this is the thing, man. Like, hip hop is just convenient. Hip hop is just whenever people want to use it, they'll use it. Like, right? Like, that's how it is, man. It's not like people like to tell me that it's like widely respected. It's like, it's definitely not, you know, like it is by people who are true fans, but with something like that, but that's what the media does. Why are you expecting a dog's going to bark, right? Like the media is going to go and make a thing out of it so they can continue their views. The media is going to find a new COVID or whatever, right? So they can keep you, you know, watching the new, like their job is to keep you glued, right? So the media isn't to respect artists in hip hop. That's not what the media has ever done. So yeah, I just expect them to do what they've always done. So, you know, yeah, man, 100%. It saddens me too. I'm not a huge Migos fan. I'm a huge artists fan, right? Like I'm a huge hip hop fan. So like, you know, there's a lot. I mean, first of all, for that, you know, over a dice game or something, a lot of times it is something pretty menial. But other times it's drugs. And that's something that I've spoken about. And my guests have spoken about many times about drugs in the music industry. And that's another one that gets me probably even the same amount worked up. But yeah, the media is going to do what they do, right? And like, they will be good to you, you know, if they're good to you, and they will be they will be your worst nightmare if they're your worst nightmare, and that's just what they do, you know.
100%. So when it comes to the rapid fire questions, you might have already stolen your answer for this one, because the first one that I always ask is, if you were to leave that one tip for the next generation, what would it be?
Yeah, I would think, you know, similar to what I said. You know, I would say don't get worked up. Don't get worried about your titles. But if the title helps you do the thing and deliver, like essentially as an artist, right? You're just the bridge. Like the art comes out of you, then there's the art, then there's the end user, the person consuming it. Like that's kind of the simplistic view of it. So whatever gets you to continue to push that ball down the field, to continue pushing stuff to that end user who is going to be the person and the people who allow your art to go to the next person and the next person, then whatever it is. So if that means telling yourself you're an artist, do that. If it means telling yourself you're a business owner, do that. Whatever it is that pushes the ball down the field, that's what I would say.
Beautiful. One thing that you are learning right now or that you want to learn?
Yeah, it's definitely just getting back into this fitness, man. I'm 151 pounds right now. My goal is 160. So that is what I'm doing right now. I'm about to go eat right after this at 3. And then I'm going to work out and I'm going to eat again at 6 and then probably again at 7 or 8. And, you know, I'm just trying to gain weight right now, man. So I'm learning how to do.
Just deadlift and sleep.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. A couple curls, man. Come on.
No, deadlift and sleep. We can go. I'll come on your show, talk fitness someday. That was my whole world for about 15 years. So,
all right, hell yeah, come to Jersey.
Yeah, that would be good. And then question 3 is, if you were to ask me a question that you think my creating a piece of content around it would help my audience learn something, what is a question that you would have for me?
Why did you transition out of fitness and what did that look like? If it's too long, do the short answer, but
No, yeah, I got you. It can be, well, yeah, exactly. That's why I laughed, right? But there is definitely a shorter answer. For one, that leads into the longer answer is the idea of like growing up, like we talked about earlier, things are passed on to us, and one of them for me was the safe job. Looking back now, and you mentioned Alex Hermosi, that's what I would have, could have, should have done. I was a leader in fitness. Arguably in the country, let alone the city I was in. And it's like what I studied for 4 years at the university level. Not that you need university for this, but I studied business of fitness. How to open a gym was like the main thing that I really focused on in university.
Wow.
As well as all the physiology and the things that go into behind that. And then the part of like being a personal trainer. And then I was working 40, 50-hour weeks, people paying me $100 an hour. And somehow I just felt like I was using that as a stepping stone to pursue the safe job, which was teaching high school phys ed. And so that's what I did. And that's the short version of that being my pathway. I will say though, that one thing was happening mentally for me was I was losing the passion for it as a personal activity.
Yep.
And this is the same reason why I've had 2 people in the last week ask me to coach them in fitness. And I'm just like, no, man, I'm like, hit me up on Instagram anytime. 100% of the time I'll send you a voice note back or whatever. But I'm like, for me, it held an important place a couple hours a day where it was my outlet and my thing. And that's the place that I wanted to put it, at least for that period in my life, where it was like, I need to use it for my own health and wellness as opposed to as a business thing. Yeah.
I like it. Yeah, no, that gives me a lot of ideas as well in terms of where I put it in my life. So appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. And we can talk the longer answers some other time.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good question. We all change, right? We all evolve, like you said earlier, and that's huge. So the last wrap up thing is where and why people can find you online.
Yeah, so, I would say probably my Instagram is the kind of collective. It has a little bit of everything. So that's Sullybop, sullybop.com, SULLYBOP. Sullybop anywhere for all of that music. The podcast is BopCast, so you can Google that too. You can Google all this stuff. Business is Podcast Principles, so you can Google that, podcastprinciples.com. So any of those 3. LinkedIn, I post every day. Instagram, I post every week. So if you want to connect with me somewhere, send me a message. Either of those platforms are fine. Email, it's all good. I check everything, probably too much. So
awesome. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been great, and definitely we'll have to run back round 2 sometime.
This is amazing, man. Yeah, could have done 3 hours easily. Excited to have you on my show someday. You got to come down to Jersey, man. I'd love to do it with you.
Yeah, that'd be great. We'll get a workout in too.
That too. Let's go.